Okay, welcome to this coaching conversation where we're going to take maybe a candid and practical look at the psychological demands of preparing for one of the toughest mountain ultramarathons in the world, UTMB. So I'm Tim Piggott. I'm a physiotherapist, endurance coach and ultra runner, and this year I'm racing UTMB, which also marks 25 years since the accident that I had, which very much changed the course of my life. So this race represents really far more than just that physical challenge. It's a personal challenge. It's quite symbolic at 25 years. And at my age now, it's quite high stakes as well. Now, in this episode, I'm joined by our team sports psychologist, Amy, who's been working with me and a number of our athletes as well in the build up to this race. So together, we're going to explore some of the mindset, strategies, and psychological skills that underpin performance in ultra endurance events. So whether you're training for your first ultra, or maybe you're coach supporting athletes, or maybe you're a clinician, hopefully this conversation will give you some insight into the real psychological work that sits alongside all the physical preparation that we do. So in this talk, we might cover some things like some adversity, maybe covering some things around identity and maybe decision making under pressure, and really what it means to show up on race day, and when it's all over, what comes next. So if you're curious about this and how psychology can help support your performance, maybe you're just looking to hear a real world conversation between an athlete, myself, and another practitioner, this one's for you. So let's get started. Thanks, Amy, for your time today.
No worries, Tim. I'm looking forward to the conversation, looking forward to hearing about your preparation for UTMB, and hopefully we can help you prepare and put some strategies in place and give you some confidence going into it.
Yeah, it's the mind is a huge part of the puzzle, if not possibly the biggest part when it comes to this type of event, for sure.
So Tim, if we were having a psychology session right now, and we were starting off and exploring kind of your whys around UTMB, could you tell us a little bit about, what is your why? And you mentioned 25 years since your accident and a personal challenge. I'm sure that's got a lot to do with it, but if you had to kind of summarize it in a nutshell, what would it be?
I mean, the deeper why is I just love running and love running up big hills and big mountains, and always have done. And that goes back, well before the accident I had. And then the kind of development of that and development of my sort of love of ultra distance running has maybe sort of grown since then. And yeah, definitely from the accident point of view, it's been proving that I can do these things when so many people have said that I can't or shouldn't. And it's something about sort of proving to myself and others that you can overcome these challenges and do some pretty amazing things. But it still just comes back to the fact that I like being in that environment. It's and UTMB itself, it's a pinnacle event of our sport. It is one of the sort of blue ribbon events, or when it comes to the kind of ultra trail running, it's almost like the Olympics of it, with all the different distances within the UTMB week. So in terms of being able to show up there and race there, it's almost, for me, it's getting to the pinnacle of our sport, and proving that even with all the challenges I've had, that you can still get to that level.
Yeah, cool. So I guess what I was hearing there, and we always ask the question why. I know you ask it as a coach, but I think it's from a psychological perspective, it's important for me to understand your why. And we know that if your why is very intrinsic and it's about the love of the sport, the enjoyment, and doing it, for self-fulfillment, then you're more likely to be successful. If your why is very externally focused, or beating others, very focused on time, being focused on time is okay. But it's really important we have that balance between the intrinsic and the extrinsic, because if we're completely extrinsic, then we're more likely to give up kind of if things are getting tough, you're 50 miles in and things aren't going to plan. If you're kind of reasons of why are just purely external, then you're more likely to quit. So having them, you know, real solid whys and reminding yourself of that during the event, during all the training that you're putting in, is really important.
For sure. I mean, I've had that in the past where I've done races where it has been very much more performance and extrinsically driven, and things have gone wrong, and I've not finished the race. I've DNF'd, and that DNF has definitely been driven by that external motivation then not really happening. So for me, you know, UTMB DNF really can't be on the cards. You know, the finish will happen some way, shape or form, unless something goes really horribly wrong. So that's why for me, definitely it is leaning on that more intrinsic why, and just enjoying being in the mountains, because the day will come when I can't stand on that start line, and I won't be able to reach these finish lines. So it's making sure that I'm it's gratitude, isn't it? That I appreciate the fact that I can do it now and take those moments.
And you mentioned like being in the mountains, the scenery. Is that something that's really important to you?
Yeah, I went out there and I ran the race route a few weeks ago as part of a training camp, and it's just taking the time to pause and enjoy the views and enjoy being there, seeing the wildlife. Although I'm sure on race day the wildlife would be scared off by so many runners and head torches and so on and so forth going by. But it is about being in that environment and just appreciating the ability and appreciating the fact that my body is currently still letting me do these things.
And when you've been really successful, so you mentioned some unsuccessful races there, when you've been more externally focused, but what about tools that you've used or coping strategies in the past where, you know, you've been more successful? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's definitely been staying calmer in the heat of the moment. You know, I think back to a 100k race that I went on and actually won in the end. But certainly in the early phases of that race, I very much stuck to my plan and let the others go well off ahead in advance. And by staying calm and not getting sucked into the excitement of the beginning, that paid off. That comes down to pacing strategies and having trust and faith in your own abilities. But I think I can then reflect on other races where I have then got sucked along at the start and obviously paid for it later on. So it's just reminding myself that the better results at the end have always come from controlling the excitement, the emotion in the early phases. And that's probably one certainly for something like UTMB to really lean on, because I know it's going to be a crazy fast start. There's going to be so much emotion at the beginning. It's known as a fast start anyway. Everybody just rushes off at a crazy pace, and it's having the discipline to remember that you've got to get to Courmayeur first at halfway, and it's really the kind of back third of the race that'll make the difference. There's been some changes to the course, and there's going to be some bottlenecks early in the race now as well, where we're going to then be funneled over some narrow bridges because of rockfall changing even just the first few kilometers of the race. So again, it's how am I going to kind of control that emotion and maybe frustration getting held up in those early stages. What are your kind of tips on how do you control the excitement? How do you control the frustration of being held up in those, you know, if you are standing still for minutes at a time waiting to go through a narrow bottleneck?
Yeah, when you were talking there, I was thinking back to, you know, when we were talking about goals, and it's, for me, it's about the process, right? So, and we've talked about chunking and having strategies to break up the race. So chunking is one form of a process goal. So if, like you've said, they're not kind of getting too excited at the beginning, well, being really strict on that initial chunk and what your pace might be, or your heart rate, whatever you kind of how you measure or even just perceived exertion. But then breaking up your race into smaller chunks, maybe using aid stations or nutrition. You're really good, Tim, at having like set packs of nutrition that you'll be like, right, that's for them 10 miles, second 10 miles, or time, distance, or however you want to chunk it. But then also having, so I always talk about your plan ABC or CBA, in terms of what's your ideal scenario, what's your if a few things go wrong, what would you be happy with, and what's kind of worst case scenario, but you still finish. Worst case scenario is obviously DNFing, but there are times when it might be appropriate to DNF. And it's important to talk that through as well, because I think that if we just have a mindset of this is going to be perfect, this is going to go great, then we're really like disappointed or upset when certain little things don't go to plan. So I always get people to write a list of all the things that potentially could go wrong and the ways that they might manage that. So being stuck in the queue or a line when there is bottlenecks, that is one of them things that you've already identified now that could be a potential issue. So how might you respond to that? You might think, all right, I'm going to use this as a rest period. I'm going to take advantage of just slowing down a minute, taking on a bit of nutrition. And then I might look at, if I know where the bottlenecks might happen, I might look at where I can gain a bit of speed or time back in other areas of the race.
No, I think that's it. We're talking about these actions on. So when something happens, what are we going to do? What's the action of dealing with that? And I think that's it, is thinking about, well, that's one of the clear things that potentially could go wrong, getting held up for more of the time than I would like. But it's then a case of that time will be made up again later on if you handle it well, don't get overstressed. So it's just expecting that to happen. And if I don't get held up at that point, well, maybe that's a bonus, isn't it?
Happy days, yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, things will go wrong in these events. And of course, the people who are successful are those who can handle things that go wrong and can problem solve on the fly. And exactly. If you go into this thinking it's all going to be perfect and you're having a wonderful day, and then when things do go wrong, because they will go wrong, that's when it can derail you, isn't it? And certainly that's where people then DNF, because they're maybe a bit behind where they should be, or something's gone a little bit wrong. But it's having those actions on for sure.
Yeah, and I think like it's hard to think this in the moment, but a lot of people who've had a lot of adversity in the event and they've overcome that adversity and then finished the race often take more pleasure and satisfaction from that race than a race that's gone smooth and like perfect, because like after the event they've come away thinking, wow, I've managed all of these hurdles and actually I've achieved so much more than just completing that race. So the satisfaction and pleasure we get retrospectively is often like higher or more, and the memories that we make from that race stick with us a lot longer, because it's been like, we're more proud of the hurdles that we've overcome rather than everything just being seamless. I'm not saying we should plan definitely for hurdles, but it's just kind of a different spin on it, or something for people to kind of hold on to be like, right, if I can overcome this, the memory of this event will be more like pleasurable.
That's it. Maybe sort of in the moment when something's going wrong, is remembering, okay, but this is not necessarily a good thing long term, but it's not the negative that it could be. Yeah.
There's other wins that we can take from it.
For sure. For sure.
So in terms of mindset for 100 miles, right? 100-mile mountain race. What kind of this is maybe a question for me, but I'm going to give it to you. What does a healthy and resilient mindset look and feel like from your perspective?
I mean, it comes down to for me, it's chunking it up, because 100 miles is just a crazy distance.
Yeah.
Going to be out there for, well, at least one night, potentially into the second night. And, many others who are towing the line will be out there for, certainly more than a day and pushing longer. So it's, how do you kind of mentally break that down? And it's that chunking, as you mentioned there. Just all you got to do is just get to the next aid station, or the next little checkpoint, or next kind of nutrition. For me, it's even breaking down into kind of 10-15 minute chunks, when an alarm will go off my watch, where I can remind myself to have a drink or take a feed of, whether it's a gel or something like that. So yeah, just trying to break it down into those smaller chunks. The kind of resilience goes back to what we were just talking about, is thinking about how we're going to manage the likely things that could go wrong. If they don't happen, then that's a bonus, isn't it? Yeah. What are some of the things that you work with some of your other athletes then, in terms of what strategies do you maybe give them, or tips do you give them on developing that?
Yeah, so like we've just mentioned, chunking's a very obvious one. I talk a lot with athletes about different parts of the brain. So especially in endurance, when we have so much time to think, and we find ourselves in quite difficult situations, and then we're having to convince ourselves, to carry on. And I always go back to, it's kind of like the Steve Peters chimp paradox kind of work, where we have these two brains. So within this one brain, we've got two parts of the brain. We've got the prefrontal cortex and we've got the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is very much the rational brain and the logical brain. So everything that you're preparing for, everything that you've worked towards is kind of in this, and the plans that you've made is this rational part of your brain. And the amygdala is more the emotive brain. It's reactive. It's maybe less logical. So it can be really helpful for us. So when you do, when you do set off on UTMB and you're saying, like, I don't want to get pulled through with the excitement, that's the amygdala being like, woohoo, I'm here. This is going to be cool. I'm so excited, all these people. And it makes us feel good. But then what can happen is, you can run away with the amygdala. What you're kind of training is this prefrontal cortex, the rational part that Steve Peters calls the human part of the brain, that says, grabs the amygdala and goes, come back, right? That's not in our plan. And I think that's really helpful for us to be aware of, because when things start to get a little bit tough, or where we go off plan, we can start to ask ourselves, who's making this decision, or who's doing the thinking right now? Is it the human or the prefrontal cortex, or is it what Steve Peters calls the chimp, which is the amygdala? If it is the amygdala, is it the right decision to be making, and do I need to rein it back in again? So just having that kind of little conversation with these two brains, and then we can start to layer onto that the strategies that we've put in place. So the prefrontal cortex says to the amygdala, this isn't in our plan. Our plan was to take on nutrition at this point, and to run this pace, to try and maintain, a calm mind throughout the event. So it's having that. Sometimes it can be a battle. And when we get tired, so our prefrontal cortex, when we don't take on enough nutrition, gets really weak. And that's when the amygdala can take over. So we have negative self-doubt. So the chimp on your shoulder is saying, you know, Tim, drop out now, you know, you've had enough, you don't need to do this, you've got nothing to prove. Or you might injure yourself, because as human beings, as soon as we feel discomfort or pain, the amygdala is screaming, quit, because it's dangerous. But the more you'll know this as a physio, you know your body, you know your limits, you know your parameters, and the more you train the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, the more you know how far you can stretch yourself. But if we deplete from a nutrition perspective, then it really impacts our kind of brain function, our decision making, and our ability to control that emotional part of the brain. So I guess
it's very.
Well,
I was just going to say, it's very kind of sugar hungry, isn't it?
very.
And when our blood sugars go down, that's where the decision making starts to go haywire. I've certainly been there before.
And at night as well. So when we did the study on Backyard Ultra, we found that thought process and kind of decision making and dropout became really high at night. And again, I think it's because I'm not a physiologist, but hormonally things change at nighttime. And usually at nighttime, our prefrontal cortex is used to shutting down and kind of recharging through sleep. But because it's not able to do that and it's getting tired, again, that's when these wild thoughts from our amygdala can start kind of creeping in. And a lot of runners, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this, Tim, where you start to really struggle during the nighttime hours.
Yeah, and certainly any second night, that's where the sleep monsters come out and the hallucinations, and your brain starts doing some weird and wonderful things, doesn't it? So I mean, that's it. My nutrition strategy is also based around that circadian rhythm and thinking about, well, what am I going to need to do to keep my brain in its happy place at 2 o'clock in the morning? So that's where I'll be using obviously caffeine, but also other things like sort of strong mints as well, just to sort of stronger stimulus and wake everything up. But so I need to remind my chimp that yes, I might feel good in those first few K of the race, but that doesn't mean that suddenly I've now unlocked the ability to run 100 miles at 10K pace.
Exactly.
Which is sometimes what the chimp is saying. Oh, I wonder what would happen if.
And I often, rather than using like chimp and human, I often ask people to name the different parts of the brains. And I worked with one ultra runner who named hers Bad Karen.
Oh, right, yeah.
So as soon as these kind of negative thoughts started to creep in, she'd be able to go, Bad Karen's here, and employ some strategies that might kind of put Bad Karen, to one side, or just to have a conversation with Bad Karen. Just to be like, it's okay, because it's okay to have them thoughts. We're always going to have negative thoughts, especially in a 100-mile ultra race, but it's just learning to either carry them with us and know how to carry that extra mental load, or some people like to block them out. So there's kind of different preferences to that. And I'm quite big into mindfulness, so especially when you're out in the beautiful surroundings, kind of doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, where you kind of do 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell. I always forget the 2 and the 1. It's taste and what other senses we've got. But yes. So but that goes back to why we're doing it. Well, we're doing it because we love being outdoors, a lot of people, and we love being in these beautiful places. So really engaging in our senses to be able to just kind of almost dissociate from some of these thoughts that we're having and just kind of connect with nature really helps to kind of get through some of them more difficult stages?
Yeah, I've definitely, and I can think back to the last time I raced Lavaredo and sort of on that final climb, and yeah, things were hurting. Obviously, I was pretty exhausted by that point, and I just took a moment just to stop and just look around and take in those surroundings, be grateful for the fact that I was there.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I got this extra boost of energy, and I smashed the final descent and clawed back probably about 10-15 minutes that I wasn't going to achieve otherwise. And yeah, I think sometimes just taking that time just to pause and reset can make a huge difference rather than just ploughing on.
And
I hadn't heard the idea of that sort of bad Karen naming. I like that one. That was good.
Yeah. And a lot of people talk about this like third person when we talk to ourselves. So sometimes we can be quite like not kind to ourselves. And I often ask clients, like, would you speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself? And what advice would you give to someone who was having the same thoughts as you? So it's kind of, again, it's similar to with this two types of brains and having these conversations. But I think reminding yourself of that and having that conversation mid-race when things get tough can be really helpful. And you mentioned gratitude as well, Tim. Like, I'm not saying that we should just live this constant life of being positive and grateful, but I am a real advocate for gratitude when, you have chosen to do this event. It sacrificed your own money, your own time, so then to spend 100 miles thinking this is horrendous, this is awful, why am I doing this? Like it's a waste. So it's thinking, right, how can I get the most out of this event? Even if I'm not running as quick as I want, what else can I get from this experience? And that's something that I'm really kind of passionate about.
You mentioned there about the sort of talking to yourself. Do you want to touch on the sort of concept of like that first person, third person, and how we should talk to ourselves?
Yeah, so I've had quite a few conversations recently about like third person self-talk. So rather than saying I am this, I am that, by referring to yourself as like Tim, or however you want, whatever you want to call yourself. I always sometimes call myself by my full name. I'm like, come on, Amy Whitehead. Don't ask me why. But it kind of, like I said before, it's as if you are talking to somebody else. So you separate you from the feeling that you're having, and you kind of experience a little bit of distance between it. So it kind of lightens the load. So in acceptance and commitment therapy, we talk a lot about if we say I am stressed, I feel rubbish. You are not stressed and you are not rubbish. Or like I'm rubbish, I'm stressed. You feel that, and it's temporary. It's something that you might experience for a short period of time. So by kind of referring to yourself in a third person, it's separating you from the feeling. So I think it's important for when you are, I don't know, maybe in a low point of an event, is that I am feeling low. Tim, I'm feeling a little bit low right now. So that it kind of doesn't consume us as much, and then we can manage the situation a little bit better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does, yeah. That's trying to almost separate the different parts of your brain again, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, maybe just having that conversation with bad Karen. Just realizing it's that part of the brain that's just struggling. So, or the chimp, give the chimp a banana and tell it to shut up, and things will get better again.
So asking what does my brain need right now in this situation, or what does my brain and body need? So it could be that your brain could need fuel. It could just need, like you said, just stop and a reset. It could need a bit of kindness, so a little bit of positive self-talk. It could need a call home. So it's again, it's hard to say everyone should do X, Y, and Z because everyone's different and has different preferences, but they're just a few examples of just being able to ask yourself that question.
Yes. Yeah. And again, I'll, those tough moments, I'll certainly lean on music as well. You can't run slowly and feel bad if you're listening to Sandstorm by Darude, for example. Or whatever your choice is. But yeah,
because
maybe that's part of that disassociation type of.
Yeah, completely. And I think disassociation is important, especially over 100 miles, being able to switch kind of off from, any feelings of discomfort, or like, so music is a really good tool for that. Again, engaging with the environment and, appreciating your surroundings. All of that is to kind of distract from some of the negative sensations and thoughts that we might have. But it's hard to dissociate for the whole of your 100 miles, because as soon as you start hitting a hill or the terrain gets difficult, then your focus shifts, and you might start to think about your body and kind of how you're feeling. So I think when we've done a piece of research where we've looked at flow and clutch, and we've looked at like endurance runners, and there's no evidence, or this in the research that we did, no runner experienced flow for the whole marathon, for example, because it's impossible to completely dissociate and perform exceptionally, because you need to engage in what we call clutch, which is effective coping strategies, putting in effort, lots of concentration at certain parts throughout an event. But what you can do is you can go in and out of flow and clutch. And that's something else that I would advocate. So when you are looking at your route, you're looking at your route planner, where are the easier parts to run on UTMB where you might be able to switch off, and where are the parts that might be tricky, more technical, where you really need to concentrate, and having that as part of your plan.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly think about it in terms of where are the really high concentration sections, the very technical descents, for example. I hadn't necessarily thought about where are the easy sections where I can purposefully kind of switch off a little bit in terms of calming the mind. So yeah, that's a really nice idea. What about sort of how we then incorporate this into some of our training? How do we actually then practice this? Because obviously, racing is one form of practice, and I certainly reflect back on races and will lean on those experiences. One particular one I'll be kind of leaning on is when I did the Ridgeway Challenge, Ridgeway 86 miler, and that sort of halfway point, I suddenly developed a lot of hip pain and could barely walk. And I remember I was messaging you as well at the time, because at that point I was in third place, and it was like, I'm in third place, yeah, I can hardly walk, and I'm gonna have to pull out the race, but this is ridiculous, I'm in third place. And I was probably spent about 15-20 minutes kind of slowly walking, sitting down, and then managed to get going again, and then overtook the next guy and got into second place, and somehow carried on. And I think you and I have talked about that one. I still don't really know how I did that. So it's just proving that I've had these hard times in the past and come through it. So leaning on those. But what about within training? Because what other sort of strategies can we do within training sessions to maybe practice some of these strategies that we've talked about?
Yeah, it is difficult, because I know you've been over to recce the course, but it's really hard to put yourself into like that full race situation. But I do think you can, practice it over shorter distances. You can practice chunking for sure. So that even if you're going out for a 10-mile run, you can be like, right, how am I going to chunk this? I think nutrition is something that you can practice that people underestimate. that those links, nutrition and psychology for me go hand in hand. So I know that, prompted by you a lot of the time as my coach, if I'm going to go out and just do a 2-hour run, for example, I need to plan nutrition in that, and that it all links to race day. So even just practicing taking on food, just makes it, second nature when we're in the event. And I think simulating as much as possible, like being in hard situations. So doing like hill, I live in a flat area, finding a hill and practicing being very uncomfortable going up and down that hill, but practicing the positive self-talk, practicing the gratitude. For me, it's all a part of, day-to-day life. To make it become habit, so that when we are in that, 100-mile tough race, then it's easier to pull from rather than practicing it for the first time. So yeah, nothing really groundbreaking, but just kind of practicing on a smaller scale what you plan to do for the race there.
And then it's even some of the reflections that we do in the journaling. So within our team, we do the weekly roundup, and there's reflections on life, training, and everything in between. And again, as we then lead into races, getting people to do their mental preparations for the race, and maybe some of that visualization, storyboarding for the race as well. These are all sort of strategies that can be useful, can't they?
Yeah, visualization I think is underutilized. In sports psychology, there's been a big shift away from mental skills, which visualization would be a big part of. But I completely agree. So for example, I'm thinking about you with UTMB, the course, you've been there. So you've got that massive advantage of being able now to visualize some of the difficult points within the race or some of the easier points, and you could probably lie in bed tonight and go through it chunk by chunk. If people haven't got that luxury, Google Street View is the best for something like that. I used to work with a pro rider who she was new to the circuit, and she hadn't ridden some of the routes before. So she would go on Google Street View and she would look at where, there would be like narrow bits where there'd be bunches, and then she'd plan where she'd want to be in the bunch, and where the climbs were and where the flats were, and kind of predict or imagine to her strengths and weaknesses how she might perform. So yeah, definitely engaging in visualization and imagery.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even a lot of the trails, there's people have been hiking with the 360 cameras, and you can exactly that, Google Street View. I mean, I've done that for entireties of, well, even up to 100-mile races, some of them where you've managed to actually map it all the way out, and the sort of the Google fly-throughs where again you can just visualize every twist and turn of the course. So even races where I've traveled out and I've never stepped foot on the course, I still know exactly where I'm going. I know what's coming up. I know what's around the next corner because I've visualized it.
So Tim, I'm just curious, this is going to be, is it 25 years since your accident? How are you going to feel emotionally doing UTMB?
It's a tricky one to know, really, because in some ways it's just another run. And I think I've got to kind of keep coming back to that one. It's a bit like, the Brownlees at the Olympics. It's just another race. But it is an important one. And, I'm planning on taking a little bit of a step back and, spending my time and energy back, with the family and work, and because these things do take a lot of time out of us. So yeah, I think crossing that finish line is going to be very emotional. And there probably will be emotional parts during the race as well. And I think for me, it's about keeping that maybe in check, and and not letting that become too much. It's that arousal curve, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've got to be careful that I don't let that emotion sort of spill over and I get over aroused. We want to get psyched up for an event, but we don't want to get over psyched.
Yeah.
So that's certainly something that I'm kind of working on to kind of control at the moment. And then once I get down in Chamonix and it's the last bit, well, they can all just go out the window, and I can see, I'm sure in floods of tears as I stumble over that finish line.
Yeah. So it's like it's almost a balance between really using that kind of feeling and that kind of, emotional connection to it being 25 years, but not letting it take over your emotions. And again, it's because it'll be the chimp or the amygdala really kind of coming out there, and then it's being able to just manage using it to your advantage, but not letting it kind of spill over, like you've mentioned there. And in terms of kind of coaching and being an athlete, and I'm sure plenty of your athletes will listen to this, how do you manage kind of that balance between coach and athlete?
Sort of coaching myself. Sometimes we can be our sort of not the best patients, as it were, coming from the sort of the medical side of things. Sometimes it's that two parts of your brain again, isn't it? It's the human part and the chimp. And the chimp is sometimes saying, "Oh no, you need to go and do that extra run. No, you need to do that little bit extra." And then it's like, "Well, no, hold on. What would the coach say?" And almost then having that conversation with myself to then, rationalize in myself in that sort of inner conversation about what is the sensible thing to be doing. So kind of leaning on the different parts of my brain for sure. In terms of the kind of 25-year type point, I think it's seeing this as an opportunity to really kind of celebrate what I have achieved, doing something pretty amazing, but also remembering that I've done other stuff in the past as well, so that it's this doesn't define me.
As humans, we're always looking forward, but we rarely just stop and look back. And I think when you stop and look back and at everything you've achieved in your career and how far you've come from that accident, I think it's pretty mind-blowing and amazing. So I think it's really important for us to really stop and look back and that whatever happens with UTMB, it doesn't define you as a person or a coach.
Yeah, that's it. I'm always looking forward, what's the next thing? It always makes me slightly uncomfortable when what you've just said there about, what I have achieved, and maybe that's the sort of Britishness in me of that sort of not taking the compliments maybe. But I think that is taking that time to appreciate, what I have done, and look back at the achievements that I have had over the years for sure. Exactly. It's not a defining moment, but it could be a nice icing on the cake, as it were. Maybe something like that. But I'd say in terms of how do you kind of so maybe throwing this back to you in terms of that strategies for what comes next and that sort of decompression afterwards, because that's certainly something that I'm giving some thought and attention to, is because I have put a lot on this race, I've invested a lot into it. How do we kind of then manage the aftermath, and how do we kind of minimize the risk of those post-race blues for however the race goes? Even if it goes well, it's then there can be those post-race blues, can't there?
Yeah, 100%. I get them. I'm panicking now, thinking after October when I've done Ironman, what will I do? But I think it's really important that, because I think we get so wrapped up in the training for this one event that that's the end goal, right? So we don't really see past it. And I think it's important to plan for post-event and quite asking yourself, like, what makes me happy? Who am I as a person? And what do I want my identity to be made up of, like, post-event? Because I think that we do get very wrapped up in something as big as this. It's a big focus, and sometimes we feel like we can't afford to look outside of that. But it's what this is a transition. So whether it's, you know, you retiring or you moving into a different area, or you shifting your life slightly, so your identity might change. So for you, for example, say this is going to be the last big race that you ever do, where, what, and kind of how might you invest your time and energy? And you might not know the answer to that right now, but it's definitely something I'd encourage people to start to think about. So so for example, I'm thinking, well, I might not train for Ironman, but I might engage in another sport that makes me happy, like might start doing cyclocross or something. Or I might work more or do more consultancy or spend more time with my family. So it's almost being prepared to fill that hole, because there will be a big gaping hole, because physically the amount of time and effort that you've put into that, there's now a space that's going to be left if you don't prepare to fill it or to shift it.
Yeah, no, 100%. You know, we'll still be doing some things. It just maybe won't be the same investment that there has been for this one. And that's it. Is, you know, I've got a weekend away with old schoolmates planned for after the race, and so sometimes they don't need to be necessarily even sporting related goals.
No, absolutely
get back to
not.
playing the piano a bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah. So okay, I think we're using up quite a bit of time now, so we'll maybe sort of wrap this one up. And like I say, thank you obviously for your time, and it's been an interesting chat going through some of these strategies in preparing for the race, and yeah, what comes after.
Yeah.
And if any of this has maybe resonated with you, and maybe you feel like having a sports psych consultation would be beneficial for yourselves, then obviously we can arrange a consultation with you, Amy. And there's details on the website. But obviously, I think it's just highlighting that, you know, sports psychology isn't just for elite athletes and professional athletes. And, you know, I know you've worked with a number of our team who are, you know, very much middle of the pack, or even sort of complete beginners, haven't you?
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, Tim, I think as well, like we've just discussed kind of race prep and planning for, you know, your big race, but we can do more than that. So sports psychology or the sessions might just be helping people manage their, you know, time, their life. There's sometimes the conflict or the struggles between managing, you know, training for such big events, and understanding our identity and being more content and happy in the world. So yeah, there's a range of different kind of things we can do. I think ultimately it's about promoting well-being.
Yes.
The happier we are, you know, the better we are as athletes, I believe, anyway.
100%. That's what we're all about, isn't it? It's health and performance, and unless we get the health bit right first,
yeah,
and the mind is a huge part of that health,
yeah,
performance can't follow until we get that right. So yeah, like I say, there's a lot that you do already for our athletes, and we're opening this up for others as well. So yeah, we'll put the links down below if you want to read a bit more about what Amy's doing, about the research, because obviously you're an academic and a researcher as well, so you're at the forefront of as a practitioner as well. So yeah, thank you very much for listening today. And like I say, if you want to get in touch with us or Amy in particular, have a look at the links down below. And otherwise, I'll see you on the trails. And yeah, we'll have to catch up for bike rides soon.
we will. Good luck with the UTMB.
Thanks very much. All right, speak soon. Take care.
Bye.